Dear devotees, we'll have a couple minutes of Nam Sankirtan and then we'll discuss further about Roopdhyan. Bhajo Giridhar Govind Gopala, Bhajo Giridhar Govind Gopala, Bhajo Giridhar Govind Gopala. Yesterday, I introduced the concept of Roopdhyan. We learned the basics, that Roopdhyan is the pran of devotion. All the physical practices are like the body, in that they are nothing without the soul, which is Roopdhyan. Just like the body has no value without the presence of the soul, physical worship of God or chanting of God's names has no value without Roopdhyan. Roopdhyan is first, everything else comes next. If Roopdhyan is in your mind, then whatever you're doing in the name of devotion is correct. And if you are not doing Roopdhyan, then whatever you're doing in the name of devotion is not even counting as devotion. It may count as passing good time, but it's not purifying your mind, which is the real point. Roopdhyan purifies the mind by joining the mind with Krishna. Maya and Krishna are the two areas where we can engage our mind. As we heard this morning, from Sri Maharaj Ji, our mind never stops for even a second. Therefore, it's going to be in one of those two places. And if we're not doing Roopdhyan of Krishna, then we're definitely doing Roopdhyan of something in the world. I also mentioned yesterday that our mind is already doing Roopdhyan all the time. It does Roopdhyan naturally of the people and things that we are attached to, that we love, or that we desire in this world. There's a constant flow of images going in our mind. We're imagining conversations and meetings, and we're remembering meeting, and I did this and I did that, and oh, next time this whole movie's going in our head all the time. Using this same nature of the mind to generate that flow of images and imaginations, we can just do Roopdhyan on Shri Krishna. It's not a new skill. We just apply the nature of the mind in a devotional direction. That's all. We don't, in Roopdhyan, we're not halting the activity of the mind. Many meditations aim to halt the activity of the mind in order to gain peace. Oh, my mind is just going all the time. I just need a break. Let me become thoughtless. But being thoughtless is not the nature of the mind. The mind is seeking happiness. That's why it always has thoughts. Just trying to stop it is like saying, mind, stop desiring happiness. So if you could get the mind to stop desiring happiness, then you could get the mind to stop thinking, but that's not possible. So really what we need to do, instead of trying to do a meditation that will give us temporary peace or will frustrate us because we're attempting to halt the activity of the mind, use that activity of the mind in a positive direction. The mind is generating all this activity and images in its search for happiness, in its search for love, in its search for someone who will be our perfect companion. This is the effort of the mind. So just divert that towards Shri Krishna. Do Roopdhyan of Shri Krishna. When will I meet him? When I meet him, he'll look like this. I'll say this to him. All the types of imaginations we have about worldly things, we can have those same imaginations about Krishna. When we have that for the world, we take on worldly qualities of whatever person or thing we're remembering. And if we have those same imaginations for Krishna, we're creating a state of union with him. We're joining our mind with him. It's so simple. The science of the mind is so simple to understand according to the principles of our scriptures. Of course, scientists will never understand it in millions of years. It's too subtle for science to correctly study. But saints, God, and scriptures have explained it to us in the perfectly practical way that we can understand what is the mind doing, why is it doing it, and how can we manipulate the activity of the mind to our advantage. So let the mind keep doing its thing, but just encourage it to go towards Shri Krishna. So this is Roopdhyan. Roopdhyan creates that connection with Shri Krishna. If you're imagining about Krishna, then your mind is connected with him. You're bringing Krishna into your mind, so you're getting his qualities, you're getting his grace. I told you also that it's not just, we could call it Rupa Rasa Gandha Shabda Sparsha Dhyan. There are 5 things we could meditate on: Krishna's form, Krishna's taste, Krishna's fragrance, Krishna's sound, and Krishna's touch. We have 5 senses. There are 5 ways to experience the world, and there are 5 ways to experience Shri Krishna. In the world, we have Mayic senses, and we try to enjoy the Mayic objects of the senses. And in the divine world, those saints have divine senses through which they experience Krishna with all of their 5 senses. They experience divine love through all of their 5 senses. So we, on the path of devotion, we're trying to attach our mind to Krishna, and we can do it through those 5 senses. We don't have to limit ourselves to only visualizing Shri Krishna. We can also imagine, just like you could imagine, Oh, she wore that perfume. And you try to remember the fragrance. You can, right? You can recall a fragrance or the fragrance of a flower or something like that. So now use that imagination power of the mind to imagine Krishna's fragrance. What would it be like if Krishna came very close to you? What would his body smell like? Radha Krishna have a natural perfume. They don't need to add any other perfume. They have a natural perfume. And then on top of that, Jagadguru Shri Kripaluji Maharaj has explained in he wrote a Roopdhyan booklet, which we actually have at the back. We have the Hindi, I see the English one there. I think we may have the Hindi as well. Maharaji wrote a detailed description about the fragrances of Radha Krishna. That when they speak, natural, beautiful fragrance comes out of their mouth. Exact opposite of us. Their body exudes a natural, beautiful fragrance. And then on top of that, the flower garlands they wear have fragrance. They put some mildly perfumed oils in their hair, and like Krishna wears that sandalwood and chandan paste on his forehead that has some fragrance. So you have all these divine fragrances mixing. So Maharaji describes that you can get all these different fragrance combinations. The fragrance of Krishna's banmala with the fragrance of his breath. The fragrance of Radharani's hair with the fragrance of her body. All these different combinations. So now tell me, how will you get bored in Roopdhyan? Have you ever tried imagining all these combinations? So we have unlimited variety how we can engage our mind. And that's just fragrance. Then there's taste. What would Yamuna Jal taste like? What would, when Radha's chewing some pan and then she takes it out of her mouth and gives it to you, what will that taste like? We have taste. We have touch. Of course, you touching Radha Krishna's feet, Radha Krishna embracing you, all these different ways to experience touch. Hearing, what would the sound of Radha's voice be? You know, we get enamored with people singing. Oh, we want to play this song for someone else. Listen to this person's voice. What would Radha's voice be like? The origin of all music is Radha Krishna. We were singing the other night about Surandran Dhyan. We were singing one pad that talked about how some yogis' minds are absorbed in Surandran Dhyan. They're absorbed in this faint divine sound. It's supposed to be a sound without a source. So these yogis are absorbed in that. So it is said that is just a distant echo of the tingling of Radha's anklet. And these yogis ever remain absorbed in that. What if you could hear the direct sound of Radha's anklet? What would that be like? In other words, we have so many ways. This Roopdhyan, we could call it Roop Ras Gandha Shabda Sparsha Dhyan. 5 different ways to engage your mind in these 5 objects of the senses, which are not only in the Mayic world, but in the divine world as well. In this way, since our subtle senses, which are engaged when we're dreaming, we're engaging those same subtle senses through this power of imagination. And those subtle senses are embedded in our mind. So really what we're doing is we're bringing Krishna very deeply in our mind by doing such Roopdhyan. And this is how the mind gets purified. Maya, remembrance of Maya brings more impurities. Remembrance of Krishna purifies the mind. This is the process. It takes days, weeks, months, years, but eventually the mind becomes fully purified. as we're bringing Krishna into our mind more and more, the mind is gradually purifying and gradually getting infused with Krishna's divine power called Swarup Shakti. Therefore, our Roopdhyan becomes more and more real. It's not just based on the power of our imagination anymore, but actually Krishna is starting to inhabit our mind for real. I mean, he's there because he's omnipresent, but now he's there in the form of Bhav-Rupi Krishna, which means that when you see Krishna in your meditation, you're not just seeing your imagination. You're seeing a reflection of real divine Krishna. We also have to imbue our meditation with Bhagavad Bhavana, as we discussed. It's not just a mental exercise. We have to really feel this is real Krishna that we're seeing. And in addition to that, as I mentioned last night, we should have some feeling of relationship with Radha Krishna. So when you're engaging your senses, like, okay, I'm smelling the fragrance of Radha's body. But who is Radha to you? Oh, she's my best friend. She's my divine mother, right? You're feeling the touch of Krishna's hand on your shoulder. Okay, but who is he to you? You're feeling the touch of your divine beloved. You're feeling the touch of your own son. So some relationship out of Dasya Bhav, Sakhya Bhav, Vatsalya Bhav, or Madhurya Bhav, you need to bring up those feelings in the mind as well. And that gives even more variety in your meditation because you're also free to switch between them. And then if you want something that brings all of this together, then imagine any Leela. A Leela that you've heard about or read about, or invent your own Leela, because Radha Krishna's Leelas are also unlimited. So whatever you can imagine, they've already done that. Even at some modern setting, Radha Krishna's everything is unlimited. Names, forms, Leelas, qualities, it's infinite. The imagining of the Leelas brings everything together because all five senses are involved, your relationship to them is involved. And a Leela could be as simple as you're sitting and Radha Krishna are swinging, or you're pushing them from behind. Could be very repetitive like that. You just push, keep pushing the swing. You see Radha Krishna come back, you push them, they go out, they come back. Or you're sitting in front watching them swing. Some kind of movement like that also helps keep the mind engaged. There are two more brief things I want to consider here today. I've been focusing on Krishna when I'm describing this Roopdhyan. However, Krishna and Radha are one. Radha is Krishna's female form. Or as Radha herself says, Mamaiva Paurusham Rupam Gopika Janamohanam. She says in Brahma Vaivarta Purana, I steal the hearts of the gopis in my male form as Krishna. Radha herself is Krishna. Some men wonder, because it's an extra step for us to think of ourselves as gopis if we want to adopt Madhurya Bhav. So some men wonder, can I adopt Madhurya Bhav feelings with Radha? Well, yes and no. So on one hand, if it's not recommended to visualize yourself in the form of a man having that type of love for Radha. The main reason is men generally think of themselves as being in charge. And there will be no humbleness in such feelings. So we should think of ourselves as gopis and love Krishna in that way. We humble ourselves before Shri Krishna. However, as a gopi, I mentioned this last night as well, we have total access to Radha's palace. We're a part of Radha's team. We serve Radharani directly if that's our bhav. We facilitate meetings between Radha and Krishna. We can cook for Radha, bathe Radha, dress Radha, arrange any outing that Radharani wants. Scold Krishna when he does some naughtiness with Radha. Tell Krishna he's not allowed to come and see Radha right now because she's upset with him. We can do all that seva. All of that is within the field of Madhurya Bhav. Being one of Radha's Sakhis is Madhurya Bhav. So we can also bring Radha into our Roopdhyan. Although I've been focusing on Shri Krishna, but that's more out of convenience and convention. We generally start by talking about Shri Krishna because people are more familiar with him. And once they understand a little more deeply about devotion, then we introduce the fact that Radha is Shri Krishna, and you can also do Roopdhyan on Shri Radha. Radha is Shri Krishna's Yogamaya Shakti. We'll be hearing in the Narad Bhakti Darshan lecture tonight that Shri Krishna has a power that makes him forget about his godliness and makes his devotees forget about their godliness, or makes them forget about his godliness and their just being a soul. So then the sweet leelas happen where God is not behaving as God. The origin of this power is Radha herself. It is through Radha's grace that Krishna forgets he's God. And Radha is also God, but it's not in her nature to do anything almighty. Her ansh do almighty things like Durga Ji, Lakshmi, Parvati. But Radha only gives love. And when Krishna is with Radha, he can only give love. When Radha and Krishna are together, there's no question of Krishna doing any almighty godly acts. He forgets his godliness in that situation. This means that the sweetest form of Krishna is when he's with Radharani. Thus, when we do Roopdhyan, we can include Radha in those leelas. We can think of Radha only. That's also an option. We can think of Krishna only. We can think of both, as long as in our heart we know that both are one. And the final point I want to make on the topic of Roopdhyan is that Guru is also one with Radha Krishna. So we can do the same exact type of Roopdhyan with the form of Guru as well. Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatha gurau tasyaite kathita hyartha prakashante mahatmanah. Shvetashvatropaniषad says something very clear and very interesting. Whatever devotion you have for Radha Krishna, which means how are you doing devotion? You're doing Roopdhyan, remembering them with your five senses, having Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya or Madhurya Bhav, love for them. How you're doing bhakti for Deve, for Radha Krishna, Tatha Deve, Yatha Deve, Tatha Gurau. Exactly the same you should do for Guru. Not can do, should do. Tasyaite. Only then you'll get God realized. You have to include Guru. Bhakti to Guru is part of the path of devotion. Without the grace of Guru, all of our efforts are incomplete. In fact, you could say our true devotion doesn't start until we accept a true Guru in our heart. The Guru is none other than Radha Krishna, who have come in that human form to help us to attain them. And if we ignore that grace upon us, then how will Radha Krishna help us? They've sent the Guru just to help us. So joining our mind with the Guru in the same way that we join our mind with Radha Krishna is a very important aspect of the path. And it's something that we need to experience. Just like by doing Roopdhyan, we experience the closeness of Radha Krishna, and it's self-evident the power of this Roopdhyan practice. When we do Roopdhyan on the Guru, we also experience the Guru's divine presence and divine grace. So it's not something we have to take anybody's word for or even take the scripture's word for. We can practice it ourselves and see the experience for ourselves and then understand based on that. These were the additional items I wanted to cover today. And now we're going to do a brief guided Roopdhyan and followed by some Kirtan. Let us all close our eyes. When I finish this brief description, I'll be starting some Kirtan, so you'll be continuing with your Roopdhyan during the Kirtan. Let us imagine ourselves in a beautiful kunj, a nice, lush, grassy, soft, grassy area, in a clearing, in a forest with a couple of huge, tall trees nearby, providing a nice covered area on a hot day. Very nearby, Yamuna River is flowing. You can hear the gentle lapping sounds of Yamuna as the water gently flows by. And you can feel a very soft, gentle breeze that's carrying some fragrance of flowers. Flowers from the tall trees, flowers from the flowering creepers winding around those trees, flowers from the bushes and small plants. So you're here in this kunj, enjoying this divine location where Radha Krishna like to come. You're waiting for Radha Krishna because you know they come here and you're expecting they may come at any time. This feeling of waiting for Radha Krishna, waiting for them to come to you, really seeing yourself in this place and awaiting their arrival at any time. This is one style of joining your mind with them. This also counts as Roopdhyan. And now you hear in the distance the voices of Radha Krishna as they approach. And you begin to hear their footsteps as they're talking with each other as they walk side by side along the path towards the kunj. And now as we begin the Kirtan, you can do Roopdhyan of your own meeting with Radha Krishna and what will happen next after you meet them. Radhe Govind Govind Radhe 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 Govind Govind Radhe 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 Govind Govind Radhe 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 Govind Govind Radhe
Govind Radhe
Radhe Radhe Govind Govind Radhe 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 Govind Govind Radhe
Radhe Radhe Govind Govind Radhe 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 Govind Govind Radhe.
बोलो लाडली लाल की We have time for one or two questions if anybody has anything they want to ask. Otherwise, we'll transition into our next segment, which is Kirtan for the next hour up until lunch. Yes.
Not related to Roopdhyan, but related to sadhana. What are the things that we should track every day in terms of our devotion, that we are progressing or not?
Well, there's a lot of things you can track. You know, he wants to know how can you judge your progress. Basically, it's bad things getting less and good things getting more. In other words, all the faults of the mind will gradually reduce as the mind purifies, and all the good qualities of the mind will gradually strengthen. And along with that, your bhav will grow. That's it. And bhav growing means when you do Roopdhyan, what you feel, what you experience, that grows. And along with that, the confidence you have in meeting Krishna in this life grows. So it's not an intellectual, far-fetched idea, but something you feel is likely or probable or inevitable, or it keeps growing and growing. That's how you judge it. Or judge your desire. How intense is your desire to meet Krishna? That also grows.
So in relation to that, is that something that's up and down in life? I mean, it's not a constant, right?
There's variation according to the sanskars, but there's a general trend over time. Or you can say just worldly attachment reduces, attachment to God and Guru increases. So you can judge that.
What is the recommended amount of time that you should spend sitting down doing sadhana versus obviously you want to be doing constant remembrance in whatever you're doing, so I'm wondering what the recommended amount of time is.
I think he's asking about how much time to spend sitting and doing Roopdhyan and sadhana every day. So it's going to be different for every person. You should look to increase it over time. So if somebody is just starting out, it might feel overwhelming if they have to make a big change to their schedule. So even if somebody starts with 5 minutes of Roopdhyan, that's going to give them benefit as long as they do it. The main thing is choose a amount of time that you can commit to every day. It's better to do 5 minutes every day than nothing for 6 days and 3 hours on Sunday. Even though the time, 3 hours is much more than 5 minutes a day is only 35 minutes for the whole week. That's still better than doing nothing for 6 days and everything on one day. So pick a time that you can do every day, and then it's up to you. And then just over the years, you'll probably want to increase it. 15 minutes, half an hour, or twice a day, morning and night, right? Maharaji never said there's any specific time a person has to do, but just be regular about it. Have a set time, you do it every day, and make it a commitment. And then gradually expand it as you can, or as your mind is willing to. Yes.
I've asked this before, but even this idea that we don't predate God, I still don't really understand that.
You can't intellectually grasp it because that requires, to really understand something, you have to be able to visualize it. So if we think of, okay, can I visualize one apple? Yes. So we can understand the number 1. Can I visualize 10 apples? Yeah, I can visualize 10 apples. Can I visualize 100 apples? Maybe with difficulty, I might be able to, but not beyond that. I can't visualize 1,000 apples, or 1,000,000 apples, or 1,000,000,000 apples. So those numbers are just vague, abstract concepts in my mind. It's not something I can actually grok. And when we're talking about our age being infinite, how can we understand that? So our mind understands things that have a beginning and an end. And to tell our mind that, no, you can keep whatever you're imagining as the beginning, keep going back further than that. Okay, how far should I go back? No, keep going. When should I stop? Never stop. If you think of it as a linear timeline from now, okay, let's go back in time till we started. You would never stop. You have to keep going back in time forever. Our mind can't grasp that concept. So it's just something we hear and we say, okay, and move on. When we get a divine mind, then we can understand those infinite concepts. So don't try to understand it. Just say, okay, must be like that, and do devotion. All right, so we'll have Kirtan. I took a little extra time so we can do Kirtan. Whoever's chanting next, do your full 30-minute session. We'll just go to lunch 5 or 10 minutes late.